the presenting issue is never the issue. Somebody comes in to say, I have a headache, give me some Tylenol. And it's like, oh, actually, you have a tumor, right? So your headache is just the headache. I'm solving the root cause. So a lot of times people will, call Bering McKinley and they're trying to solve something like low utilization or, getting more sales or, whatever kind of tactical thing they're thinking about. And when we dig in, the real issue is this partnership is broken. There's no accountability and there's no real clear direction of where we're going. All right. Welcome to the BMK Vision podcast. Today we're going to explore a really, I was going to say fun. It's not fun. It's actually really not fun. Gary, I've spent a lot of time with clients over the last week, and we've got one that is a place I've been before, and it has to do with partnerships. And I could share probably half a dozen stories of partnerships that we've helped dissolve. In fact, there was a period like 10 years ago where I was afraid that was going to be my reputation of just breaking up partnerships. I've sat with partners way too often, and it feels like this year, late last year, that's rising up again, where I'm spending a lot more time than I ever hoped to, helping partners dissolve. And I know we've talked before. You've been in some partnerships in the past.
Yeah, yeah, I've had
Yeah,
one active and one old one. Yeah.
that's right. And with the other one, did that resolve pretty amicably? Did that turn into anything too messy?
It was an even split. Nothing really to report. No disasters. Yeah.
Good.
So, yeah.
Did you get to enjoy the benefits of partnership? Did it kind of inform how you were successful in that entity?
Yeah, so are you saying, like, did I enjoy the benefits of during the process of having the business or at the
Having the
end?
partners, did the partners make the difference? Was it
The
because we're in this partnership, we were able to go further than without the partnership?
Yeah, they did their job in the partnership, and specifically their job was not my job. So that was nice. That's what I wanted. So
That's the beauty, right? I think that's the whole episode. Their job was not my job.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, as we've talked about on previous episodes, that should be the table stakes, but sadly it's not. That real clarity in, why do I have this partnership? Why are we in this partnership? Hopefully, it's because you do something I am unable to do, or you do something so much better than I can do that this partnership really starts to make sense.
So what is the reason why that thing right there gets missed? What do you think? Like,
I think there's a lot of naiveness that occurs on day zero, and presuming a lot of partnerships start on day zero of the entity. I think there's this kind of fear, this discomfort, this bond that maybe you feel you have with someone. I've seen so many partnerships are born out of Bob and I worked at our last company together, and we decided to start this company. And that comes with a lot of interesting decision making, and you just kind of envision these two folks at the previous company just endlessly talking nonsense about the existing company they work for. Yeah, Bob, you should have been the manager. You're better than that. And we could have done this better. And boy, aren't we aligned? We're so aligned in the fact that this company sucks and that we're the only two people that get it. So now we're going to start a company and do it ourselves.
so with that kind of situation, are these like buddies that like water coolers talk and they're sitting around the servers and doing late night installs and those kind of things? Are they the same role?
That's what I think.
Yeah.
That's what I observe. I see a lot of that. Just a couple of engineers, couple of techs, and they're awesome. We're not talking shit on them. It's just yes, it's human behavior. It's what
Yeah.
happens.
And it
Yeah.
feels good, right? It's like, oh, you know what I know, and maybe I know a little bit more about this subject, but so you're seeing this complementary kind of relationship, Um, but you're forgetting maybe what's beyond that, right? So what happens when you actually have to sell and you actually have to do customer service or accounting or those kind of things? Is that what I'm hearing? We're not thinking
That's
about that?
yes, absolutely, and that is that. So now we found this like-minded person, and we have a shared experience. So naturally, we start a business.
Sure.
Then you get this moment in time of talking to their spouses. I'm thinking about quitting, and Bob's thinking about quitting too. And I think we could probably take this client or that client, and we'll be fine. And so now you've gone even deeper, where you've vouched to the most important person in your life, your spouse, of how great the other person is, and how that's supposed to comfort your spouse into saying, "Yeah, I'll come along for this. That checks out well enough." And well, hell, if Bob's doing it too, then this must not be a terrible idea. So that spouse is, probably fighting a lot of their resistance to this really scary thing of starting a business.
Yeah, and it's like on the kind of the topic around this or subtopic of like why partnerships are powerful. Like what we can get sucked into is like, oh, if we had two of us, we could cover more clients. If we had both of us, then the risk is balanced, and I don't have to like worry about it so much because Bob's here to help me out. Is that like a service level kind of idea, or is there something to that, do you think?
I don't know that there's much to that, but I
Okay.
think it's very much a service thing of, it's a little less scary to walk into that dark room of entrepreneurship with somebody by your side. And that thought probably doesn't go much deeper than, um, here's some clients that are probably going to come with us, and we're already familiar with them, and they'll probably say yes, they'll come along with us and leave our company with us. So I think that's maybe one of them reads the e-myth. Maybe they get some kind of notional idea of where they're headed, but I just typically observe that it's uh, very reactionary, very short-sighted, and we're not even talking about the partnership. At this stage, we're just talking about starting a business based on your experience at your previous employer. Then you get into that partnership, and now the world's begun. And then what tends to happen is they have more success than they envisioned, but from the outside looking in, very few would say they're successful yet. Okay, so they grab that, you know, couple of clients. They have $300,000 worth of revenue spread across, three or four clients, and the world is great. But then they start realizing where they're at. And it's like, wow, we're not really making any more money. Wow, we're on call 24/7. And then, one or both of them starts feeling like we could actually grow this thing. And these are all new thoughts. These are all like, they've been a W-2 employee for 20 years. So it's a brand new world. And that's where that first moment comes, where they have to say, well, what do you really know, Bob? And what do I really know? And start figuring things out. And as they figure it out, it's very low probability they're going to stumble across an optimal setup.
Hmm. So what is when you're seeing these clients come in, um, are you seeing a ceiling, that gets hit? And, when there's yeah, like, is there a ceiling that's hit? And, like, is there a clear sign? Like, what's coming to mind is, like, there's no, like, complementary roles here, right? Like, if you're both in service, you both kind of grew up doing tech work, it feels good to kind of join forces and kind of go conquer the world. Um, is that ceiling, like, just shining a bright light that says, "Hey, two of you doing the same thing doesn't really make anything better at this level." Is that kind of what you're seeing?
That's a lot of what we see. And then we won't meet them. I won't meet them until they're 5, 8 years into it.
Mhm.
And a couple of things have happened. Either those partners are so bonded, they love each other, they value each other, but now you've got like this, kind of how do I say it? They're validating each other on things that aren't true. So now they've just kind of they've just convinced themselves that they're walking north when actually they're walking southeast. It's, yeah, we're making the right decision, we're doing the thing, but they're confused why it's not working. So that's an option is they just grow tighter and tighter and they keep validating each other incorrectly. You know, like that thing of, you know, perfect practice equals perfect play. It's they're practicing, but they're not doing perfect practice. It's like I can go swing the golf club 1,000 times a week, and it doesn't matter if I'm doing it wrong. And if my buddy who's watching me says, "Yeah, you're doing it right," and yeah, that looks like it. It's like, well, my game never improved. So that's when we typically meet them, uh, and that's where we start kind of deconstructing some of the things that they've learned along the way, and putting a finer tip on things. But there's been so much erosion in decision making and idea creation that it's like having to break that down and say, "Hey, you're not quite on the right path there. Let's reframe that." And in the best case scenario, they're both there saying, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. I got it." But that's where that ceiling begins because they're going to hear from ourselves and anyone if they talk to any, competent consultant, they're going to say, "Who owns sales? Who owns service?"
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, so, I did it's just, like, screaming at me, like, we have this, like, system of standards, in the vision, system that we're implementing into these clients' networks and, companies, right? And it's like, this ownership domain is kind of what, like, is like, I'm thinking about, like, oh, have they ever really thought about their ownership level? Was this a thoughtful kind of transition from employee to ownership? And what would they say to a lot of these things? Like, do they have an operating agreement put together? Do they have a exit strategy? Do they have any kind of roles and, defined at that ownership level? Like, is that kind of what if they get hit with that, are they just going to be like, what's this?
It's so fascinating in that area of that operating agreement alone. Uh, Oftentimes, like one of two paths that happens. Either they get on Rocket Lawyer and just bang out, the most basic LLC creation document and they answer a bunch of questions and everyone's being polite and yeah, 50-50 and yeah, it asks us this question, what will we do if? And they just use a boilerplate answer. And so they just haven't faced those really tough conversations. The other path is, they go to an attorney and that attorney, almost always is so blunt with them that it almost scares them. And then they're forced into a position of saying, we're different. And so the attorney just has to be sitting there shaking their head, but they're there to help the people, help their clients get done what they want done. So not a lot of consideration has been given to who has what responsibilities? Do both of us have to work in the company in order to get ownership equity? What do we do at the when we're faced with something that might cause a dissolution of the entity, and those things are just boilerplated, so they're really backed in a tough corner. So there's a ceiling right there. Is we didn't talk about this when the stakes are low. Now we're having to talk about it when the stakes are much higher. Yeah.
So what about like the best of times, right? Like what's a partnership look like, when you're talking about really solid partnerships? What's kind of happening in the business um that's maybe making the partnership feel really good or maybe smoothing it over to where it's hiding some things that may not be so great.
Remembering that we're on the first path and there's a second path that we're going to address as well. So the first path is two folks, know each other professionally. Maybe they worked at the same company and away they went. Um, where that works out really, really well is if just even if they come from the same role, they both were, level 2, level 3 technicians, and they said, "We're gonna go do this thing." Where just something organically happens when one of them is a little more outgoing, dynamic, social than the other, and that happens all the time. One person just is a little more outgoing, and that person typically they just kind of that partnership just finds its way to, "Hey, Bob, you're really good at getting the new clients," or when the phone rings, you're just naturally the person who talks to them, uh, and if that sustains them through the, 800,000, 1.2, then that's great. Where it can get a little bit crazy is when they realize that in that 5, 6 years, they haven't made any more money. Then they start kinda questioning, "What is this all about? Are both of us really pulling our weight here? Yeah, you're doing mostly the sales stuff, but I'm the one, you know, taking those client calls in the middle of the night." And that just has to get worked out to really value each other. But kinda best case scenario of it working and smoothing is we're just really willing to work really hard and, one of us is bringing in the business and one of us is supporting the business. It's just best case scenario is you're going to work your butt off for 10, 15 years, right? Like
Is it
that.
like an ebb and flow thing where it's like, sometimes one guy has to step up to the plate while the other person, has to take the back seat or gets to like take their foot off the pedal a little bit? Or is it like everyone's just all in all the time? You know, what's going on there?
Yeah, I'm really thinking about one particular partnership that just kind of defines them all, and this was one about 9 years ago, or actually about 15 years ago. And what tends to happen is that person responsible for who's a little more responsible for service, they're oddly, not oddly, they're usually also the one who's really responsible, like in their own life, how they operate as human beings. They seem to oftentimes understand the business even better, and they'll work themselves to the bone, and that person responsible for generating new business is oftentimes a little more loose and carefree, and maybe isn't always as financially responsible as the other partner, and that lack of financial responsibility drives them to grow the business so they can get more dollars in to cover up their personal financial mistakes. That happens all the time. Like, it sounds so specific, but it happens all the time, that pattern. Um, so they just keep on grinding, and neither one of them really take their foot off the brake because that business is so personal as well. You've got those 2 or 3 anchor clients who were the first clients, and they'll work themselves into a lack of profitability with them, but it's so personal. And then any new client, that service person is just so, um I don't even know what the right word is, just gonna service the hell out of them, and they just cannot see failure happening, while that salesperson, or that owner that's more responsible for the sales, that they're doing what comes natural, but ultimately, it's just you're waiting for the phone to ring, and you go to chamber events, and you are the public face of the company, and it doesn't look like much because it ain't much, but they are very committed to growing that revenue one way or the other.
And when we're talking about these partnerships, point of clarity for me and maybe the audience is like, are we talking about is a partnership always a 50-50 partnership? Are you seeing, MSPs and, a different type of split? And if so, how does that affect compensation and effort and kind of the reality of being a partner?
For those ones that kind of genesis the way that we've described so far, working at the same company, and those are almost always 50-50. And we've agreed, I'm gonna make 60,000, you're gonna make 60,000. We rise and fall, together in complete equalness. Good or bad, we could talk about that for an hour, I'm sure. But yeah, they're typically just a straight 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking about a couple that I've a couple friends and clients in the past that I've seen, and there was some like 60, 20-20, and some 80-20s and some 90-10s even. And I always thought like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I wonder if they're really giving 10% of the effort that the other person's giving or something. Like, I couldn't really kind of square it up. It's like, why do they get paid um less? And is it an equity thing? Is it like, did they put in more cash? Like how that kind of works out.
So, I think it goes into our second scenario where two existing companies merge. Now people, behave much smarter. Not ideal always, but there's a lot more pre-work because you've built something. Maybe one guy's gotten it to 2 million and the other guy's gotten it to 600,000. And there's kind of that merge version and there's that acquisition version. And typically it's a merge version. And what we see is a little more thoughtfulness around equity, but no more thoughtfulness into who's gonna do what and be responsible for what outcomes. It's typically people just being people and protecting what's theirs and vying for, the best equity position they can negotiate with their new partner.
Interesting. And tell me about how, when we sit down with these partners, maybe you have some examples of like when they start looking at their business and looking at their partnership and trying to structure goals around where they're trying to go, whether it's a lopsided partnership or where there's a majority minority or maybe the even 50-50. What generally happens, or what can you bring up that's happened recently?
Yeah, so there's this phrase that I'm sure all like mental health professionals, are just it's probably just a cliche almost or just throwaway because it's so obvious to them that the presenting issue is never the issue. Somebody comes in to say, I have a headache, give me some Tylenol. And it's like, oh, actually, you have a tumor, right? So your headache is just the headache. I'm solving the root cause. So a lot of times people will, call Bering McKinley and they're trying to solve something like low utilization or, getting more sales or, whatever kind of tactical thing they're thinking about. And when we dig in, the real issue is this partnership is broken. There's no accountability and there's no real clear direction of where we're going. So when we come into these, and if there's a partnership, my mind's already going down that line of like, I wonder what we're going to find, and there's always something. So typically, um, those fissures start revealing themselves when a third party comes in and starts asking really tough questions, right? Because you can tell me you want to grow, but once I get you both in the room, or three of you, or five of you in the room, it's cool. Which one of you owns this? And that's when, they start looking at each other and you can just start seeing the wheels turning. And, if there's two of them, one of them wants to dive in, the other one does not want to dive in. And then you start asking the tougher questions about, well, what does the agreement say? What's the equity split here? And when you start hearing 50-50, I get really nervous. When I start hearing 40-60, I feel a little more comfortable because it means, all right, one of you truly is kind of the leader by default because you have the greatest equity stake, and that other person who has the lower equity stake, uh, it's always interesting to start seeing how they react to this because they start thinking about, well, I make the same money as the other guy, but he has more equity, and I'm already working my butt off. And I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but really kind of the path where this goes or how this path unfolds itself a lot of times.
Yeah, and what are you finding? Like, are there like deep rooted beliefs that they've been holding on to, and when they discuss things internally, they're rooted in those. What happens
Yeah.
when those beliefs come out in our strategy sessions that you've seen?
Oh man, that's great. And this is true of partners and non-partners. When it's partners, it's just doubly difficult. Have you ever heard an MSP say, "We've built this business on word of mouth"?
We'll be right back with more, but first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Okay. And in your experience, do they say that meekly and shyly, or on one end of the spectrum, or on the other end of the spectrum, are they shouting it from the mountaintop and puffing the chest out, and you're just so proud of that?
Yeah, it's typically the only driver they have, and they're super proud of it.
They're super proud of it. They don't and really, it's like, cool, good job. They think that's a superpower, but
Uh-huh.
it's like, no, dude, that's every business in the history of time in their first, 5, 10 years. And so when you've got two owners believing that that's their superpower, um, that's the most widely held belief. So that when you start challenging them that, hey, we need to actually do this a little more proactively and a little more strategically, um, one person starts nodding their head and the other person is deer in a headlight.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think they're wrong in the superpower stance, because I think it does solidify one thing. It's like, okay, we can get clients and we can service them and they like us enough to refer. It's just how fast can you grow? you know, Eventually the referrals dry up, and the service, it's tough to keep that level of service as you grow, right?
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit. You said eventually the referrals start drying up. And do you have any deeper thoughts on that?
I think the it's a percentage of total business, right? So it's like, at 500,000 and you get 2 or 3 referrals and you have like 2 or 3 clients, you just doubled your business.
Mhm.
It's like it feels amazing. Everyone's saying they love you because everyone is 3 people, right? And so now it's like, okay, now if you want the same thing, now you need 6 referrals. Probably attainable, but maybe they don't come in at the same level. So, the drying up factor is like, if you're servicing them the best you can, their network only goes as deep as their network goes. Um, so as a percentage of new business coming in, it just kind of looks like it's drying up over time.
And I think that's 100% accurate. I think if we go even deeper, my observation has been that any MSP can get to $1 million if they're not a total jerk or just absolutely sheltered person. Any of them can. I mean, when I look at the people that got to 1 million, it's like, wow, how did you do that? And others, I'm like, well, no kidding, you got there. But I always say it's tied to the value of your personal network. Right? So eventually your network is not going to grow at the level that gets you, enough business to continue to grow for 15 years to whatever, income level you're trying to get to. So it's really tied to the value of your network. Some people's are greater than others, but it just kind of turns out the magic number is around $1 million of revenue, and it usually takes about 5 to 7 years to get there. So it definitely dries up. Uh, but that's not something anyone wants to hear, or they're not expecting to hear that. They oftentimes believe that that can just continue going, and they're just a little confused when it stops. So when we present to them the idea that, hey, it's time to get out there and put some money into some really smart marketing campaigns and some really great sales activity. Now I've got two of you, so I'm really excited. Which one of you wants to take that on and make that internal promise? Service promises this gross profit and this client experience. Sales promises the 10, 15, 20% growth. And man, it's just who can point their finger the quickest of not it. Right.
Yeah. So on that note, right? Like when we're talking about partnerships, we're talking about roles. Best case, we're saying, there's one person in the sales marketing kind of department, and then there's one person in the service kind of customer relationships type of business part of the business, right? Is that kind of what we're saying at the top level? So if we kind of stretch that out even further, like what are the things that we need in place um, to protect the partnership over the long run? Like, is it just simply like, hey, we want a partner, we spin up our LLC, you do sales, I'll do service, and then everything works out? Or is there more to that kind of initial kind of structure that we need to think about setting up? And if there is, what happens if we don't have that?
So that's a really loaded question, and presuming that we don't get to meet them on day one. What I found over the last 2 years in particular, and I don't know if you would describe me this way, but I can be a bit of a bull in a china shop. So prior to the vision system being really dialed in the way it is, when I would come in and find that, hey, we've got to, kind of think about two owners, two different paths, you do sales, you do service, that would just turn into this big, messy conversation. We'd get to where we needed to get, or we wouldn't. And, oftentimes we dissolve the partnership. But with the vision system, what that thing is that they can have in place, now I wait. When I know there's probably a partnership issue, I'm going to let that reveal itself through kind of the vision operating system. I'm going to let that reveal that first question of what do you want? Where are you trying to go? Which essentially is that thing that most people have heard is like when you start a business, start with the end first. Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to accomplish? That brings out some great conversation. Now we get into milestones. That's pretty easy. All right. That's like easy. So we haven't really, if no gaps were found in the partnership in the what do you want? Milestones, we get a couple hours of relief because we're just talking mechanics. Then we start getting into those initiatives. And that's where it's like, if you had started with this on day one, which you didn't, you heard the word business plan. Maybe you went to the SBA, small business office, at the local community college, which is great, but you were just phoning it in. You didn't even know the heaviness of what you were being asked. That SBA coach did, and they did their best they could, but you put together a pretty light and fluffy business plan if you did anything at all. So now fast forward 5 years and you meet Bering McKinley, we're going to build that plan from day one. And that's where we start saying, well, who should we assign that growth initiative to? Okay. As we start breaking down the initiative goals and the action items, it starts getting really heavy and getting really real because we're asking you to do things that you haven't had, one of you to do things you haven't done before. Now, this is just presuming that service is going great, right? But, I love getting these clients, at year like 4 or 5 when they're still in a little bit of a honeymoon. It's not too fractured. Uh, and we can start building that plan with them. And they start identifying that, oh, I see the logic of this plan. It makes sense because I have 5 years of business experience now. And I really do want my partner to step up. And I'm observing how they're reacting to Barry McKinley. as they're trying to put some hard deadlines and some hard action items in front of them. So ideally, everyone would start on day one, build an amazing operating system and an amazing business plan. Reality is it doesn't happen.
And when you're talking about the legal structure around these businesses, are we seeing that there's these like real tight operating agreements, or based on what you just said, do those not exist?
Man, it's like 50-50. If they got on some, legal Zoom or something online and just banged it out, and all they're thinking about is, I'm supposed to have an operating agreement, let me get an operating agreement. It's not gonna be very well thought out. And they're not gonna have that buy-sell agreement in there. They're not gonna tie compensation to role. They're really saying, how do we make this legal? They don't wanna think about if they get in a dispute about something, how that gets resolved, how they do evaluation, if one partner wants to exit or being asked to exit. So they have to make it up on the fly when that moment happens. Others will get attorneys, and that attorneys, I think just categorically, they're gonna do a really great job of putting you in those tough positions and making it uncomfortable to say, "What about when this happens or that happens?" So we see a little bit of a mix between the 2. Most often, it's pretty poorly defined, and if they have a buy-sell agreement, they're really proud to show us, "No, oh, we have a buy-sell agreement." And it's like, "Great, what does it say?" "Oh, let me pull it up and read it." Well, you don't even know what it says. You don't understand it. So when you pull it up and we start reading it together, it's like maybe a little vague, maybe a little too extreme. It's just not quite what they understood it to be. So now we gotta have to kind of face that reality of where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. When I'm reading the few partnerships that I've set up, and the last one that started reading it a little bit deeper and thinking like, yeah, what all this breakup language that you have, it's like, it feels weird thinking about that when you're growing the business and trying to put in a lot of effort to it. It's like it doesn't feel natural. It feels like you're kind of trying to look forward into the future and predict a way that things could work out that aren't necessarily a good thing. So I could see people skipping that often because they're just like, oh, well, that'll never happen. It's like, yeah. And then like as far as like the equity, in the business is that what's like protecting the equity is like the operating agreement? Um, or is there something else as far as like how they define equity in the business?
The when we're talking about this area becoming a challenge for a partnership, it doesn't happen every time, but when we're talking about that, the majority thing, the most common thing that comes up with is my partner isn't suited to have a leadership role in the business. And when I've identified that, then I have to go to that operating agreement and start trying to find the answer to, can they still be an owner and not have a leadership position? And that's really uncomfortable, right? Because that other partner didn't start a business to be an employee of the business. They started this business to lead the business, whether they knew it or not. But their ego is telling them I'm supposed to lead. So protecting the equity is, I hear that as, does my role protect my equity? Do I have my equity no matter what? Even if I decided to exit the business, do I still get to be an equity, keep retain my equity? I don't find that that's very well defined in a lot of places. And I'm no lawyer, so maybe it's just, hey, that's just the way it is. Everyone's got to battle through their individual circumstances, but I suspect there's a pretty good answer out there.
Do you like I'm just thinking about it's like if you're at the point in a partnership where you're worried about the equity, what's happening? Are we past the point of no return? Is this like, is this thought a natural thought in partnerships? And, should people really care about that stuff?
I think it's when I think of the dozens, if not hundreds, of partnerships that I've been involved with, I maybe I only see people who are challenged, right? And maybe that makes me feel like it always happens. It probably doesn't always happen, but in the circumstances that I'm involved in, typically they're to a point where a lot of times I'm putting them in that uncomfortable position because I am asking them to do something different. Um, but I can't imagine that many partnerships don't get to that place where they think, but it's like any marriage too. It's married long enough, and there's going to be that moment of like, well, what if I was just on my own? Or, hey, he really is a pain in my ass, and what would it look like to get divorced? And it's just not worth it. I'm sure that that's a really fair analogy. Yeah. So when yes, so if you're in that spot where the equity starts popping into your head, more than once a week, you probably need to get a counselor, just like a marriage. You got to get somebody in there to say, let's fix this thing. It's worth fighting for. It's worth getting there because when I see upset partners, it's very much like a marriage. I mean, they start really resenting the other person pretty heavily. And if you don't get in front of that and figure out how to get some real counseling, it, it doesn't resolve itself, period. You get, moments of relief, where everything's just firing on all cylinders and you figured out a way to just kind of ignore, that other person's flaws. And man, I keep thinking I'm talking about a marriage. Where you're just kind of you're coping.
Sure.
Right. The
Yes.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, the technique, like, obviously it's situational, right? But, what's kind of, so am I hearing you right? You're promoting kind of like this, hey, if there's problems, let's face them, let's get clarity around them, let's work on resolving them because the other side of that is really messy. Am I hearing you right?
For sure. And I'm an old man now, and so I'm much more patient and calm and want to see people work things out. I think in my earlier years I was much more reactionary. I think I was what a marriage counselor wishes they could be. I think a counselor has a little different duty where it's, I'm here to resolve this and keep you two married. Back in the day it was, hey man, you hate this person. I agree they suck. I don't see them getting better. Just go make them an offer and get done with this thing. Figure it out. And I don't think I was wrong to do that. I'm just accelerating what's probably inevitable. Whereas, a marriage counselor has to, has a little different duty of care. They get to pretend, they get to tell them what they need to hear or want to hear. I would race right to it, and sometimes that's, its own therapy. Cool, you guys hate each other so much, break up, and then I become the common enemy, and they figure out how to, tighten it up if they can, and start not acting a fool. We were involved in one late last year where, you know, both partners are just good guys, just really good guys, and we worked for at least 18 months on the partner that eventually exited, where they just, whatever their character flaws were, they were never going to perform at the level this company needed, and it didn't need much. So, the remaining partner just kind of lived through their own hell for that 18 months of trying so hard, spending a lot of money, trying to get this person leveled up and accountability and working a plan, and the person just couldn't. There's no degree of babysitting we can do to solve, that person's, organic state of mind of not wanting to be accountable, not wanting to do the hard things, not wanting to, um, you know, hold their own team accountable. So it is somewhat inevitable once you start facing it.
So when I was dissolving my previous partnership, um, it was in the situation. It just made a lot of sense for them to pay me out, and we kind of did evaluation on the company and just kind of stretched it out for a few years. And they came up with the money, and it was great for me because like it definitely made a ton of sense. And I was thinking about them and like, well, if everything still works and they're able to grow it, this will work for them. Um, there was no world where I was gonna stay attached to that business, for many reasons, not the partners, they were great. It was just the business itself, didn't work for me and my lifestyle anymore. Um, but I'm thinking there's another way. Is this a crazy idea where, maybe the business is doing okay, maybe it's not doing okay. And, I don't know if it really matters. Um, but let's just say the owner that doesn't really want to be there, or at least is showing that he doesn't want to be there, or she doesn't want to be there. Can they just step away and still remain an owner, like in the partnership? Is that like a real thing?
It is a real thing. I'm reminded of this situation down in Australia where just the exiting partner was just so beloved by the remaining partner, and I fought tooth and nail on both their behalves, and they ended up just saying, "All right, you don't work in the business, you still get a profit share, but since you're not working in the business, you're not going to get paid. We're going to do annual dividends, and naturally, our profitability is going to be different." And they structured a higher compensation plan for the remaining partner, so that leaving partner wasn't enriched unfairly, or unequitably, because there is something to be said for leading the company still. That worked out really well. But I think there is a version where a partner can step away. Now, the challenge that I see, Gary, is, you operate at a very mature high frequency. I don't see many owners just saying, "Hey, man, this partnership isn't working for me. I've got to exit. Figure out a way to buy me out. Let's work it out." Like, I just haven't seen it. Now, in your case, you did it, and it probably seems obvious to you. Um, Most people, they're so tied to, "This is my only thing. I'm not ready to go get another job." So they'll stick around, just because they own it, and they'll do a poor job. So it typically, in my observation, comes down to, I have to remove this person from the business. They do more harm than good. So that remaining partner, willing to concede that, yes, you still get to be an equity partner, but you don't get to work here anymore. That's a pretty tough, speed bump to get over for them.
So you would say it's harder for the remaining partner that's working in the business to accept.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
going to grow this thing. It's going to be amazing. I'll do better without you. And we're going to be so profitable, and giving up, half the profit to you. That doesn't seem fair. Hey, those are very natural human thoughts. I don't disagree. So, and when you're kicking somebody out, uh, being savvy enough to get them to agree to less equity to not be in the business is, I think that's pretty tough. Probably not impossible, but pretty tough.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, it does kind of twist your brain up, especially if you start this thing from nothing and don't take money on the way up. Um, it's really all about sweat equity and effort,
Yeah.
right? So it's like hard to discern between equity, pure equity, and actual effort, and what's the value of those. So yeah, I could see a conflict definitely arising there.
Yeah, and in the example from late last year, I'm thinking about this. That exiting partner was a really nice person. They were very passive in just their personality trait. So they took it on the chin. It's like, basically what was being told to this person was, "You suck at this. You don't get to be here anymore." And that person was just like, "Yeah, I do suck. I'm not suited for this." And so they kind of rolled with it. I mean, that's a and I think there's some pathology behind that person and what drives that, but there was also a real genuineness to it of like, "Yeah, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, and I understand where you're coming from." And then as we got deeper into the negotiations, that person did kind of advocate for themselves a little better. I was happy to see that. Um, but you know, that's a rarity. No one likes to be told they suck, and they want to resist that, and it's likely going to end pretty contentiously.
So in the best case scenario, let's just say maybe one of the owners is aging out, right? They just
Yeah.
they kind of want to retire, but they don't want to sell their stake, and maybe maybe it's a father-son thing or mother-daughter thing, whatever the kind of scenario is where it's like you still have this legacy ownership. Is it like make sure you have a board that they have a seat at so they're still kind of involved and so they're still playing within some kind of bounds of like adding value, or is it possible to just not be around anymore when this is happening? So like, oh, just send me my check and you just collect that forever. Is that like a thing that you've seen?
Yeah, in the family businesses for sure, or trying to think if I've seen that. In the family businesses for sure, where it's just like junior doesn't have the cash to buy senior out. And so it's very much a drawdown, but senior wants to make sure the thing's still going to be, whether they have any real acumen or not to make sure it still succeeds at a board level is, TBD. But yeah, in token, it's because I'm letting you pay me over time, I'm going to remain, present in some fashion and I'll draw that equity down, over time for sure. What and all of this is answered by a great buy sell agreement. I wasn't just going to say buy sell agreement. I had to put the word great in there because we do see, oftentimes there is a buy sell agreement, but it's very vague. Because there are some clauses in there that can add clarity in the tough moment where it's just like, did we set an expectation for the role? Did you meet that expectation? No, you didn't. Great, I get to call that option to say I'm going to force a buyout here. And when that's clear, boy, that's nice. That's real nice because it's, hey, I by contract I can force this to happen. Let's not go down the force it to happen route. Let's really talk about how to make this happen. But we both agree, or arbitrator would definitely agree that you were to maintain this standard. It's documented you weren't. We have conversations that are documented that you haven't met the standard. Now let's do this. It's almost like a prenup. What young 23-year-old couple in love wants to think about a prenup? They don't, but if they both come from wealthy families, mom and dad are gonna make sure there's a prenup conversation, but no one likes to think you read some of those celebrity prenups, and it's like, "Yeah, we're supposed to have sex 2 times a week, and you're supposed to do this," and, like, all this craziness where, hey, that's actually really pragmatic. Romantic? No. Pragmatic? Yes. Uh, with these buy-sell agreements, if you can get some real clarity on, what is the standard we expect, what happens when we violate that standard, how does that process flow? It's very pragmatic and it happens every day, just not often enough in our client base.
Okay. So if we're
Yeah.
thinking about like, you know, maybe we have a few listeners that have, started a partnership, maybe they're thinking about getting into one, maybe they're thinking about getting out of one. What are
Right.
kind of the main takeaways that like they should think about here from what we're talking about?
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you start us off with a couple? What do you think some main takeaways are?
Well, what kind of, what we started with was like how we strengthen that partnership, making sure those roles are clearly defined. That seems like such an obvious one that gets missed and corrects so many things. I think that's like that main takeaway for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then the other one that we talked about was like, we talked a little bit about the referral network and, the growth of the business, especially early on. It's like everything feels good. You just like told your ex boss to shove it and you're starting your own thing. And it's like, you don't realize how misaligned you are. You're both doing service, no one's doing sales. All of a sudden you hit a wall or
Yeah.
ceiling for that matter.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of, how about you?
Yeah, those are great takeaways. I think that don't go looking for problems you don't want to find. I don't, just because you listen to this podcast or your spouse thinks your partner's a dipshit, you don't have to bite at every bait. Uh, but really think about What did we set out to do? Are we doing it? Is my partner, or am I myself, am I living up to the expectation of what this business needs? And if that answer doesn't come clear to you, then maybe the problem is we haven't set a clear enough expectation. And that's typically the problem in any relationship. You're with your kids, with your spouse, with your partner. It's, do I have a hidden expectation here that maybe I didn't even really recognize that I have? And is that why I'm frustrated? Well, the first thing to do is just to be very candid and sit down with your partner and say, what are your expectations of me? What do I need to do to be a great partner to you and a great advocate for this business? And maybe even if you don't think you're the problem, you showing that vulnerability to say, hey, there's a chance that I'm not meeting your expectations. What are your expectations? Right? And realign that, and maybe that, you chose this partner for a reason. You loved him at one point or loved that person at one point. Get out there and start the conversation. No matter what, even if there isn't a partnership, kind of issue, recalibrate and say, what are your expectations? What are my expectations? Where do we want to go with this business? That conversation is going to either heal something that's beginning to break or prevent something from breaking in the future. Okay. So, and you can do that by yourself. The vision system really works well with that because you get to have a structure to put those expectations in. What are the KPIs? What are what's the plan? Because a lot of times, these businesses are just kind of, we think about them taking off. Well, every takeoff is optional. Every landing is required, but that takeoff moment is exciting. It's when you're just flying in circles in the air that you start getting, a little bit antsy sitting in that seat and wondering, what this is all about and questioning everything. Well, start planning that descent into where you want to go. And doing that earlier is always better than doing it later when things break. I think that's my takeaway, as long and rambling as that was.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
good.
mean, it's the partnerships with the structure are going to be the ones that can survive.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And it's and listen, you're likely to face that challenge when you're on the way up, when you get that initial early momentum. That momentum is usually the first 3 to 5 years. That's gonna mask a lot of inefficiencies and accountability because you're just so busy, right? Especially that first 3 to 5 years. It will get hidden in there because you're gonna give each other a lot of grace, and it's like, "Yeah, we're really busy, but once we, at some point, this should just right itself. We'll just get better at it with enough reps." And, just pay attention to those moments if you're in those early years. Again, don't go looking for a problem, but don't be naive to the fact that, if you're in that really busy early stage, um, you know, outside looking in, we can all see what's going to happen. Inside looking out, you're in it so deep that you're just not able to spot what might be coming for you.
Well said.
Yeah, right on. Well, it's good, and just kind of coming back to these most recent scenarios, getting a front row seat to the dissolution of a partnership is very, very uncomfortable. I mean, we're right in the middle of one right now, Gary, and it's just watching everything we've talked about play out exactly how it's happening in this business. It's going to be expensive. It's uncomfortable. The world kind of stops, right? Like, we're working with this company on some really strong growth initiatives. The staying owner and the right hand person, they're working their butts off. But just having spent a couple days with the staying owner, it's like his head is not in the game. This is a very mature, very savvy, very personable person, and it's just like we're going through their action items, and it's like, you haven't done shit, man. Right? Like, so this is like 5 months since they built their plan, and just watching this person come to a screeching halt. And again, not even recognizing that they've come to a screeching halt. Like, pointed it out to this person. They're like, Oh, that's what it is. He's exhausted. He's mentally exhausted. He's gonna have to move, back to, an area of the world where it's like, I gotta be next to my business. It's everything is starting to crumble. And the team doesn't even actually know that this is happening. So they're left, feeling uncertain, I'm sure as well. So avoid this moment. I'm telling you, I get a front row seat to it all the time. It's not fun. So
Yeah,
go
doesn't
go
sound like
back
it.
and look at your agreements and make sure they're saying what you need them to say.